All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 television show in the history of the entire universe. I'm Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing Robert McCammon, They Thirst. This right here is the original, well, this is the paperback version that came out from Pocket Books in 1988. The book was written in 1981, so it's one of Robert McCammon's earlier books. This is the newer release by Subterranean Press, so I've got two versions here. Let's talk about the covers first, because you know I love graphic design and cover illustration. So let's do it. The more modern version, it's kind of got... it's got this castle overlooking the city of Los Angeles. Pretty standard like font for the name and the author's name, and it's all right. It's good. It's decent. But I do really like this one a lot. This is a illustration by Rowena Morrill, who did the first handful of McCammon books. And this is just I love everything about this cover because it just screams 1980s horror novel. Look at the font they used for the title and the author's name. And then the painting just screams early 80s horror. I just love everything about it. I give this 10 out of 10 just for the nostalgia of the old-timey covers I like. So, this is Robert McCammon's vampire novel. As most horror authors end up doing a vampire novel, this is his. You know, if you followed my channel, you know that I love Robert McCammon. Probably one of the top 10, if not top 5 favorite authors of all time. I did do a top 10 favorite authors ranking on my channel a while ago, and I know Robert McCammon finished pretty high on that list. Just love everything he's done. Everything. Just one of my favorites. Just a wonderful writer. And dope stories. Just all of his stories are just cool. That's the only way to describe them. They're cool. So this one starts out, not only that, but I've met the guy several times. I almost forgot. I met him at the Salt Lake City it was the World Horror Convention held in Salt Lake City. And that's when I had my books and he signed most of them. You know, I always show off my signed books. Anyway, let's get to the review. They Thirst, vampire book. There's a prologue, very gothic and dark. I loved it. I was drinking in every word. It takes place in a town called Krajak, near the Jaeger Mountains. Now, whenever I see in a book, whether it's a political thriller, an espionage thriller, like The Bourne Supremacy or The Da Vinci Code, whenever a place is named, I Google it so I can know whereabouts on the planet I'm reading about. So we start this in the Jaeger Mountains, town called Krajak. I Googled both of those and I couldn't come up with... I think they're somewhere in Switzerland, Austria, or Germany. I think. You guys can Google Jaeger Mountains. It's spelled like the Jägermeister. It's spelled like that. And Krajak. Krageck. Google those. I could not find much about this. I get the feeling that it's probably somewhere in Switzerland, Austria, or Germany. Anyway, so we get this cool prologue that involves a shotgun. That's the thing, is I didn't know exactly when in time. To me, it started out, I was like, okay, this is maybe taking place in the 1800s. Or maybe even prior, but then they pull out a shotgun, and I'm like, okay, so yeah, it could be, I guess it could still be in the 1800s, but the time frame is never really nailed down of when this stuff is happening. But it's very gothic, very like Dracula-esque. There's some monsters, there's some things going on. Really well written. And then I thought that's a cool opening of sort of this haunted area of Germany, Austria, or Switzerland. And then and that's only trumped, because I really liked that opening, it's trumped by an even cooler second scene where we are in Texas between Fort Stockton and Pecos, Texas. And then I was like, after Googling the Jaeger Mountains in Krajak, I was like, well, now I got to Google Fort Stockton and Pecos to see if those are real places or if those are as vague as the other thing. And then, so Fort Stockton does exist, Pecos does exist, and there is a highway between them, which this scene takes place on. And as I Googled Pecos, Texas, I was like, okay, it's Pecos, Texas. Google it yourself. I was fascinated by this little town. Because when you Google things and then you click maps, it shows you where it is, but then you click on the street view, and I was twirling through the street view of Pecos, Texas. Sometimes novels send me on a wild goose chase, and the next thing you know, I'm in the rabbit hole of the internet, just trying to learn everything I can about Pecos, Texas, because of a Robert McCammon novel. And as I'm Googling the street view, I noticed there's an old Pizza Hut there. And I used to love those old Pizza Hut restaurants, like the ones you could walk into and actually sit down and dine in. Loved those. And there was one there. And not only that, but there was a cool Dodge Challenger parked in the parking lot. And I was like, that's dope. Google it. See, go to the street view, twirl around. You're going to see the very same scene I saw. Go on that little adventure, would you? Please? Anyway. The scene that takes place on the highway between Pecos and Fort Stockton. One of my favorite scenes, opening scenes of any Robert McCammon book, if not any book at all. We've got this guy riding a Harley. He's like an albino, clearly a vampire or monster of some sort. He goes into this little hillbilly honky-tonk bar and just wreaks absolute horror, carnage, and death upon everybody in that bar. In Jack Reacher fashion. Just kicks the out of everybody. I loved everything, and then he's like, okay, and he gets on his Harley and he moves on, and he's on his way to Los Angeles. Now the rest of the novel takes place in Los Angeles, and it is a myriad of characters that we are introduced to. Just one character after the next, after the next, after the next. So many characters, it almost becomes unwieldy. However, if you've got the patience and then you just slow down and you read through this, concentrating, you can keep the characters straight, and they are great characters. We've got everything from we've got cops, we've got drug dealers, we've got cons, we've got prostitutes, we've got the LA elite, all of these characters in LA, and then we've of course got the vampires. The thing that I loved about this book the most was it took place just in the span of a week. Like each day is given about 100 pages of, this looks like a small book, but it's almost about 700 pages here. 560. Round it up to about 560, that's almost 700. Anyway, it's so each about 100 pages per day, and each day goes by, and then the vampires, they show up subtly at first, and then they, by halfway through the book, it is nothing but vampire on human wreckage and blood and guts and all of that stuff that a great monster movie or monster horror novel is going to provide us. It was just seriously cool. And there's a lot of characters, and a lot of things are happening, and a lot of stuff is going on, and Robert McCammon is juggling a lot of different plots in this book, along with the monsters, which are the vampires. And it's just, the vampires are dope in this. There's just no weakness to them. They're just killers. They're just straight killers. And there's a side plot in this, which I really enjoyed, that there is an actual serial killer in the book called the Roach. And I liked the Roach. I liked that side plot of this serial killer. And our albino, I think my favorite character, though he got very little screen time, was the albino vampire that killed all the hillbillies. And his name was Cobra. That's cool. I like that name. The one thing I like about Robert McCammon books like Stinger, Swan Song, Boy's Life, well, all of his books, is there's no pretentiousness to it. There's no weird, pretentious, out of the ordinary names for any of the characters. It's just cool stuff like Cobra. The bad guy in all of the 80s movies should be named Cobra, especially if he's a vampire. It makes sense. Cobra's got teeth. Vampires got teeth. Why wouldn't every vampire should be named Cobra, especially if they're an albino and they ride a Harley. There's motorcycle gangs in this too. It's just a cool book. I really liked this. I read this a long, long time ago when I was a kid, and I have not read it since. And I was pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed this in the second reading. I mean, I remember enjoying it the first time, but it was so long ago, and I'm so old, and I'm so forgetful. I give this, literally, I'm going to give this about a 9.75 out of 10. The only drawback I saw was I think readers are going to be overwhelmed with the inundation of characters, because there's a lot of them. Anyway, but that is my review of They Thirst by Robert McCammon.